Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's way better, isn't it? You hear me now? That's good. Welcome this morning. We're still in Matthew. We will be for a while. We're going to try to finish up Matthew chapter 9 this morning. We can get rolled through it. There's quite a lot in there. Of course, that always seems to be the case. Seems like there's more than what I thought. We may not get through chapter 9 this morning, but we're going to try. We're going to be in chapter 9, verses 18 through 26 to start. Once again, welcome everybody. We can get everybody else to sit down. We'll get started. You weren't the last one, did you? You was the last one, so you did good. I blame that on Keith, though. That's Keith's fault right there. I know how it works. All right, Matthew chapter 9, verse 18. As Jesus was saying this, suddenly an official came up and knelt down in front of him. "It's my daughter," he said. "She just died. But if you'll come and lay your hand on her, she'll come back to life." Jesus got up and followed him, and so did his disciples. And just then, a woman appeared. She'd suffered from internal bleeding for 12 years. She came up behind Jesus and touched the hem of his coat. "If I can only touch his coat," she said to herself, "I'll be rescued." Jesus turned around and saw her. "Cheer up, young lady," he said. "Your faith has rescued you." And the woman was healed from that moment. Jesus went to the official's house, and there he saw the flute players and everybody in a great state of agitation. "Go away," he said. "The little girl isn't dead. She's asleep." And they laughed at him. So when everybody had been put out, he went in, took hold of her hand, and she got up. And the report of this went around the whole of that region. Now, looking at that from our perspective, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on. If you look at that from a Jewish perspective, there's a lot going on. We've just been through a pandemic. We may still be in a pandemic. They can't tell us one way or the other. But we know the horror that it brings everywhere it goes. We understand the difficulties involved with disease and the things that are going on. And so in our situation, everyone's taken very strict precautions at the height of the pandemic, especially about hygiene and things like that. We wore masks and washed our hands, wore gloves, stayed out of public spaces, stayed out of small groups. All those things that they put in place for us to try to minimize the effects of what was going on as far as the disease is concerned. So, and all, I say all, they don't seem to be. If you've watched street vendors on any kind of YouTube channel or something like that, hygiene does not necessarily correlate with, say, my kitchen at home versus what's going on the streets of Bangkok. I can tell you that. It's a little different. But we all have some, in cultures, we all have some idea of hygiene. We have some idea of cleanliness, and so we only notice them when something is off. Someone, like I said, in on the streets of Thailand or somewhere, would not notice. I'm going to call it the lack of what I understand is to be hygiene, as I would understand. I would recognize it immediately, and it was just every day for them. So when it's pointed out, it's introduced all of a sudden, kind of like with the pandemic. But we all learn to wash our hands. We all learn to do the dishes and those kind of things to keep clean. So we understand those basics. We have an idea of those basics. And so if we put ourselves in the time of where Jesus was in the society before modern medicine, where you couldn't cure infectious diseases and you didn't have antibiotics and you didn't have all the things that we're accustomed to today. It becomes more vital to have strict codes of hygiene and conduct and how you behave in a certain way at certain times. And so, we learn in the scriptures about things they could and couldn't touch, things they could and couldn't be around. We learned about leprosy probably a couple of months ago now, but in the infectious sides of that, and we understand those things, so you wouldn't become impure. And we look at those things and we see regulations and the things they built on to the laws of what they could and couldn't touch, but it's common sense now, and they meant it was important to not spread throughout the community whatever disease or whatever it might be, their practical wisdom to keep society safe. And so the Jewish people had these regulations like that, and of course they were codified later, and they just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But to make clear to the public how they're supposed to act if they're sick, how they're supposed to behave in a situation where they're sick, unclean, impure, any of those words. But what we find here in this passage is Jesus, he doubles down. Okay? There's two things that were near the top of the list of the things to avoid in order to stay pure, to not be impure. Okay? Blood and dead bodies. Okay? In the passage we just read, Jesus has been exposed to both of those particular things that we're supposed to keep away from. So no Jew would have missed that in my mind about what was going on in the crowd when the unclean woman touched Jesus. And he didn't scold her. He didn't. During the COVID pandemic, if you happen to be in a Walmart and somebody came in without a mask and coughed, just wherever, just coughing everywhere. Just picture how you would feel at that moment. This is how the crowd would feel about this unclean woman going through the crowd, knowing better, spreading her impurity, and touching this man, touching Jesus. Okay, that whatever level you are as far as your fear of whatever it may be, your fear of the pandemic, your fear of the flu, your fear of whatever it may be, your level of fear would affect your reaction to that particular thing. And that's what I'm trying to get across. So under these circumstances, Jesus would have had to, according to what was going on at the time, he would have just had to stay away, wash his clothes, and he could come back tomorrow. Wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have been, using the hand sanitizer and moving on. It wouldn't have been something that would have been, that stood out as far as him making himself clean again in that particular way. But nobody would have given it much thought. But now a man shows up in a panic. Okay? They've kind of given Jesus this one. He'll wash his clothes tomorrow. I don't know. I don't know exactly what would have been expected of somebody that was in that situation as far as the time frame was involved. Would it have been immediately, hustled out of town or outside the wall to where he could, make himself clean again. I don't know, but here we go. He's still going. An official comes and falls at his knees, falls at Jesus' feet, and begs for the life of his daughter, basically, is what's going on. Okay. Now, that just sounds like a guy begging for the life of his daughter. But if you look at it from the Jewish perspective, which we're going to try to do, normally, an official would be very dignified in his role as an official. He would walk at a certain pace. He would wear certain clothes. He would speak with a certain volume, very dignified, very uppity. We all know what that means, right? Very uppity. And so here we have a guy that throws all of that aside. He throws himself on the ground in front of all the people that would have been, he would have wanted to look good in front of, and begs this man for the life of his daughter. Okay, very unusual circumstance. So, right there in front of his neighbors, and everybody, we can see that dignity gets thrown out the window at that time. So, as we switch to the story that he follows the dignitary, the official, or whatever he is, as we watch what's going on, and we're going to go back to the lady for a minute, as we watch what's going on with the crowd, I thought this was an interesting statement that this, we all know the story of the woman that's had this ailment for 12 years and was cleansed by touching Jesus' hem. But it becomes different at this point because her uncleanness doesn't infect Jesus. Okay? It's Jesus that infects her. It's flipped on its ear. So her faith made a difference in her healing, and the word we use here for healing is save or rescue. Okay, and so now we have, before we get back to the centurion, we have the attitude now of the Christian looking at the situation. And you have all these different perspectives of what's going on. If you look from a Christian's point of view, they would see that this rescue, this salvation, is the beginning of what he's planned for the world at this moment. Okay, he's rescuing the world, saving the world. That's his plan. And as a Christian looking on, that would be as a believer reading this particular section would see that from that perspective. They would, they have a little hindsight into that. So now the greatest destroyer we know is death, and so this official's daughter is already dead. People in her house know it. They've already started the mourning process with all the pomp and circumstance that goes with that. And now we have Jesus. His presence is completely misunderstood at this point. Okay, and it just horrifies me. It just horrifies me, and I don't know why. Because it's something that I guess it's human nature. We don't like to get laughed at. We like to get laughed with. We like to laugh with others. They are laughing at Jesus. Not the best move, I wouldn't think. It just when I read that, it just horrifies me, and I don't have an explanation for it, but I just want you to know that it does. So he runs everybody out. Okay, and this is where he double dips. he grabs the girl by the hand. So now he's touched the corpse. Okay? So he on the two of the things that are high on the list of things not to do, now he's done them both. Now we could argue, since we know the story, that she wasn't a corpse. Okay? And at what point she became a corpse or not a corpse, I have no opinion. But those around would have understood that she was dead, that she was a corpse. I don't know how long she had been dead. Yeah, and so they had enough time to get all the stuff together as far as pomp and circumstance, all the wailers, all the mourners, and so there would have been that time frame involved. But anyhow, from the outside looking in, he touched a corpse. Okay, another no-no. So, but she arose, and we've been talking about resurrection and the raising up of what's going on. So. In our country, in our society, in the world we live in now, we have a completely different way of dealing with these sorts of things. Not death, but impurities and diseases and infectious stuff, But the very, some of the very things that we use to cure are poison. Okay, they're pollution. They're pollutants. And so there's all types of pollution. And now we have advocates against pollution. We don't want the we don't want the air polluted. We don't want the water polluted. We don't want the ocean polluted. All of those things, we have advocates for all of that sort of thing. But that's not the kind of thing we're talking about right now. There's other types of pollution. There's other types of pollutants. And it's the pollution that gets into our minds, gets into our hearts, and into our imaginations and our memories. Okay? Those are the things that we combat every day. Okay? Those are the things that we have to deal with. Mike talked about guilt. That's something that we have to deal with. Any of the memories of our past, if it was, that's the thing with memories. I tend to just remember the good stuff. I don't want to remember the bad stuff, but every once in a while that bad stuff will creep in, and that's what I don't want to happen. And so how we deal with the pollutants of our mind and our imagination and all those things, there's different ways that we find ourselves dealing with that, okay? Prayer and reading Scripture is one. Avoiding certain things that bring back those memories, places that you used to go that you shouldn't go. Avoiding people that may have put you in a certain situation that you didn't want to be in. We have all kind of ways of dealing with that particular thing, and so when we talk about stories like this, and we talk about the outsiders looking in, and all they see is the impurity, and all they see is the breaking of what they considered laws of conduct as far as hygiene and all those things are considered, that kind of muddles up the goodness of what's going on, okay? And so we see the healing, okay, but we can see from their attitude, it wasn't about the healing. It was about being in contact with the disease. So it wasn't about the raising of the dead. It was about being in contact with the dead. And so, they basically were laughing at him for saying that she wasn't dead. Their knowledge or their understanding was that she was dead. And And so we have to go with that she was dead. And he said that she's not dead, she's just asleep. And they laughed at him. And so he, everybody got run out of the house, and sure enough, he was able to wake her up. Oh, absolutely, absolutely, it was. And like I said, in hindsight, looking back at this, it just horrifies me, that they would laugh, and it brings me to, the cross where they just mocked him, and it just it hurts my heart, and I don't know any other way to explain it. So. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so, could do something about it. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then, yeah. And so, yeah, let him do his thing. That's exactly right. And we can see where faith had conquered all dignity, and faith had conquered all social norms, because you look at the woman, she knew going through the crowd. And, it wasn't like she just, Jesus is over here by himself separated away, and she just kind of, weaved in and out, and didn't touch anybody, and sneaked in and got to Jesus. Jesus was we read different stories in the other Gospels that the crowd was on him, like just a suffocating crowd. And she touched everybody on the way in, knowing that was not how you behave. She coughed on everybody at Walmart. That's what she done. She coughed on everybody at Walmart. And still, her faith got her to the point of healing. And so we're going to move on to Matthew 9, chapter 27 through 37. Another interesting story. So as Jesus was leaving the area, two blind men followed him, shouting, "Have pity on us, Son of David," at the tops of their voices. Jesus went into the house, and the blind men came into him. "Do you believe that I can do this?" asked Jesus. "Yes, Master," they replied. And Jesus touched their eyes, and "Let it happen for you just as you believed," he said, and their eyes were opened. And Jesus gave them a stern warning. "Take good care," he said, "that nobody gets to know about this." But they went out and spread the news in the whole region. And after they had left, people brought to Jesus a demon-possessed man who couldn't speak. Jesus cast out the demon, and the man spoke, and the crowds were amazed. "Nothing like this has ever happened in Israel," they said. But the Pharisees said, "He casts out demons by the prince of demons." Jesus went around all the towns and villages, teaching in the synagogues, announcing the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. And when he saw the crowds, he felt deeply sorry for them, because they were distressed and dejected, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to the disciples, "There's plenty of harvest to be had, but not many workers. So pray the master of the harvest to send more workers to harvest his fields." And we're going to shift a little bit. I promise we'll get back to the theme, I promise. But when I talk about James Bond, everybody in the room knows who I'm talking about, right? Whichever iteration you want to think about, whether it's Sean Connery, whether, whoever you thought was the best James Bond, we all know who and what was portrayed by James Bond. And so, it's the danger and the drama and the intrigue and the double agents and the all that sort of thing that we know from stories and books and any of the stories about the Cold War with Russia and the United States and all the spying and all that kind of stuff. And so, but at the heart of that whole genre, is somebody not being who they seem to be. Okay, you know, you get surprised in movies about, you know, the bad guy. He just, you know, didn't think he was a bad guy, and then all of a sudden this guy's the bad guy, you know. And so we know that scenario, and so the ones that seem to be on our side may be working for them, and then the secrets are leaking out, and everybody's under suspicion, and want to know where the leak is and who's doing the. You know, why are they getting these mysterious phone calls, or how did all this money end up in their bank account, or all the, you know, and then it just starts swirling around, and then we start talking about them, especially if we know one of them. You know, you cast suspicion on the person that you don't necessarily like, you know, and you know, and you can in the movies you can watch them move the suspicion to somebody else and do that kind of thing. So you just, you know, I don't know, but you know, I don't know for sure, but I think this so and so may be working for, you know, the bad guys. And so we all have that scenario in our minds, but now we have the Pharisees talking about Jesus working for the enemy. You know, Jesus is working for Satan. He's doing these things for and through and by Satan. And so the accuser, the dark power that's out to get us all, to stop God's work, to prevent Israel from being holy and being upright and being rescued from its present plight. Well then, when you get to that point, who is it that's the double agent? Who's secretly working for Satan in that scenario? And so we find that the Pharisees, their opponents, Jesus' opponents, he's in league with the enemy. He's casting out demons by the prince of demons. And we look at that and we think, that's how ludicrous could that possibly sound? Because it sounds ludicrous to me. But I have, like we talked about, I have the hindsight. I have the whole story. I have the insider information that shows me that what he was doing was out of compassion for God's people. Was completely and totally unobstructed by any kind of personal gain or any kind of power play or any kind of anything like that. But when you look at the Pharisees and you see the jealousy of you know, just boil to the top, you see their complete misunderstanding of his mission here on this earth. You see the lack of faith, the lack of they're getting to see what they've waited on from the beginning, but they can't accept it. So I don't, you know, they got the blinders on, and so they have a choice at this point. Okay, they have a choice, and we all have a choice, but they have a choice at this point to decide how to explain what's going on. Okay, they could accept the fact that Jesus is from God, that he's, you know, even at the least a great prophet, a great teacher. But in doing so, in acknowledging Jesus as from God, they're handing over their own power. Okay, they're handing over their own position as shepherds of God's people, the leaders of God's people. Okay, they're handing that over. They're giving that up. And so they're not willing to do that. They only have two choices. Either he's from God or he's from the devil. Because at this point, there's no way to deny what he's done and what he's doing. Okay? There's no way to deny the healing. There's no way to deny the casting out of the demons. There's no way to deny the raising of the dead. There's no way to deny what he's done. So now all they can do is skew the public opinion about why he did it and who he's doing it for. Okay? And obviously, Satan is the only choice. Okay? Because if he's not from God, he's from Satan. Now, being able to explain that idea would be a very difficult thing to do. Okay? Why would the devil be raising up? Why would the devil be casting his own out? Why would the devil be healing the enemy? You know, there's all those things that there's no way to explain it. Does anybody else hear that echo? Because this thing is killing me. I'm going to go down one more. One more. I went from here all the way to here. You got me, Mike? Nope, still echoing. That's okay. Let's deal with the echo. Okay. So either he's God's chosen deliverer, or a great prophet, or something more. But he was either that, or he was a spy. And he was double dealing, and he was working for Satan. Saying so. Those are the ones that had the other agendas, you know, who had themselves hoped to be the standard bearers for the kingdom, bound to be jealous and react badly, which we saw them do. He's done a deal with Satan. He's a spy. Don't trust him. Okay? And so that's their only angle to discredit Jesus for who he is, what he's doing, and why he's there. So oftentimes the only thing you can do when you're, and we're going to just call it slander because that's all it was, just when you're slandered to this point and being spoken of in that way and just being discounted and just disavowed, I guess, I don't know, laughed at. You know, you can only do what you're there to do. You can just keep doing what you're doing. And, you know, Christ talks about that a lot to his disciples, about how things are not going to be easy, how things are going to be, you know, not just hard, but terrible, terrible hard. And so we find that at the end of the passage we were just reading about, you know, pray to the master of the harvest, pray to send harvesters. Outside of the Lord's Prayer itself, Jesus doesn't very often instruct his disciples or tell his followers what to pray for. But this time he does. He says, go to the farmer, he said, beg him to send workers to bring in the harvest. And as his followers pray that prayer, the answer comes back. You are yourselves the harvesters. Okay? So you are yourselves the answer to your own prayer. And so what Jesus has been doing for the last couple of chapters that we've talked about in Matthew, under his own authority, under his own work, now his followers are to do at his command. You know, so he's sending them out. You know, and talks in other passages in the scriptures about sending them like sheep to the wolves, and they know it's going to be bad, and we know the history of how Christians were treated throughout the years, and through, especially in this time. At the very beginning, I would have to think that without, I'm going to call it God's involvement, without God's involvement in the work in the work of Christianity, it never would have. We wouldn't be sitting here if we look back at what the church went through, how the church was persecuted and damaged and tore down and tortured and all of those things that were stumbling blocks, just the physical things that were stumbling blocks to the church, and we still ended up where we are this morning. We have to see God in that picture. We have to, because I have to put myself in the place of an early Christian that has seen the miracles that Jesus performed, that perhaps walked in the crowds where Jesus, healed somebody, been in the house where they brought people to Jesus, where they dropped the man down through the roof. Okay. And a side note, what did the guy that owned the house say about that? Is what I want to know. They ripped the roof off this guy's house to get somebody down, and I understand the end of that story. The man was healed, but at the end of that story, he still's got a hole in his roof, and he didn't get anything for it. And that's, I don't know if that's just the Western civilization talking through me or what, but if the same thing was happening today, if the same, and around the world it is happening, persecution is happening, but if the church was in its infancy today, if Jesus had just come today, where would I be in that scenario? Okay. Would I be one of the laughers? Would I be the dignitary groveling at Jesus' feet? Would I be the woman passing through the crowd? Would I be the one that turned my back on Christ and walked away? Where would I find myself in that scenario? And I think as we go through the scripture and we read about the fields being white for harvest, as we read about the miracles were done and the demons that were pushed out, and the blind to see and the deaf to hear and the mute to speak, and all of those wonderful, wonderful things, and we can see that in those instances, one of the factors involved was a faith that was unstoppable, a faith that did not look to popular convention as far as how to behave in a situation. And so having that faith and understanding what it took to have that faith, and then being able to read the rewards of that faith, I think puts us on a good path for the church to be here in another 100, another 1,000, another however long, to always be here until the end. And I think that as we watched Jesus send out his disciples, I think we're sent when we obey the gospel and we understand our part in what God has in store for the world, beginning with what we found Christ, planting that beginning, that seed, and we watched it crescendo. We've been watching it. We talked a little bit about that a few lessons ago, watching the story crescendo and get to where it was, and we're gonna get to the we're going to get to the beginning. I'm not going to call, we're going to get to an end, but we're going to get to the beginning as we watch all that fold out. It's important to remember that that's why we have the scriptures. That's why we have the story. That's why we're able to look at it from different perspectives, from different writers' perspectives, even from different commentators' perspective. There's a lot of things I read of someone's perspective. I don't agree with it, but I can look at it and I can understand how you can draw some of that conclusion based on how you were raised, how where you grew up, how you were treated, when and where you became a follower of Christ, what time in history that you put on Christ is different. It's different now than it was even 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And so, the challenges that are involved, we can look back and see that the challenges are involved with our Christian existence in the world that we live in can sometimes pale in comparison to the challenges that were faced in the times that Matthew was writing and writing about. So, anyhow, actually, I got it. Look at that. I'm putting that away, and I'll bring another one next week. We're going to start in a different area next week. So, thank you so much for your time and patience and putting up with me.